In this edition of I Escaped, a mass breakout from death row, the biggest in U.S. history.
They were death row inmates. They had nothing to lose by killing us.
And 4 escapes in 4 years? No wonder they called him Badness.
He would be one of the most dangerous criminals to ever have been on the run.
Around the world, over 9 million prisoners are behind bars. These are the stories of the few who dared to break out. Mecklenburg Correctional Center, Boydton, Virginia, 1984. Claiming to be escape-proof, it holds the worst of the worst, more than 360 of them.
It was just waiting for to explode, tell you the truth. They were rough, tough guys.
Y'all open the door!
The tightest security was for death row inmates.
They were just very dangerous. You know, it was unexpected, you know, tell them what they might do.
On death row, 6 vicious killers sentenced to die by the electric chair are scheming to escape.
They were death row inmates. They had nothing to lose by killing us. They had nothing to lose.
Heading the escape plan, the Briley brothers, James and Linwood, serial killers.
Linwood and James Briley terrorized Richmond during the late 70s with a series of rapes, robberies, and murders.
Among their 11 victims, 2 elderly women, a pregnant mother, and her young son.
They broke into the house. They raped the woman, shot her, shot the 5-year-old boy, and then beat the husband to death with a bed slat.
The other members of Death Row 6 were equally violent. Lem Tuggle raped and murdered a 52-year-old woman, only 4 months after being released from prison for strangling a 17-year-old girl. Earl Clanton strangled his neighbor to death over $8. Willie Jones killed and stole an elderly couple saving, then set them on fire. And Derek Peterson shot and killed a shop owner in cold blood during a robbery. Together, the 6 men watched each guard's every move, noting their routines.
They watched us close enough to know who could wear whose uniform. They watched us close enough to figure out who was going to be on duty.
They began collecting an arsenal of weapons and even extracted radio passwords from one of the guards.
Inmates are some of the most experienced manipulators in the world. They talk to you, they question you, and if you don't watch what you say, you might tell them your whole life story.
The Death Row 6 are almost set to go when some news on the prison grapevine puts them in a spin. Another gang of prisoners is planning a full-scale riot. If that happens, the prison will go into lockdown, making escape impossible. On May 31st, 1984, after months of planning, the Death Row 6 are suddenly forced into action. Late in the afternoon, all 6 men are heading out to the exercise yard. Noticing the guards were no longer taking head counts as they returned, the gang knew it was their chance to launch an escape. So while marching back into the cell block, the Death Row 6 created diversion. And one of the 6, Earl Clanton, slips into an unlocked toilet. Without noticing Clanton missing, the guards in the control room flick the automatic switch locking the prisoners back into their cells. To get Clanton access to the control room, the prisoners need to lure one of the guards out. The incessant whining finally gets the better of the guards.
Okay.
They just left the guard there for a split second. That's all it takes.
The officer makes an ill-fated move, stepping out of the safe zone and leaving the door open. It's the moment the Death Row 6 have been waiting for. Clanton charges out of the toilet, barreling into the control room.
Clanton made a big run for the guard's box, and he was turning the knobs before the guard even realized what was going on.
All hell breaks loose. In seconds, both guards are overpowered. But taking over the cell block is one thing. Getting out the front gate to freedom is a much bigger challenge. Mecklenburg Prison, Boydton, Virginia, 1984. The Death Row Six, led by the Brierly brothers, have just overwhelmed 2 guards in a brazen escape attempt. Officer Milton Crutchfield is first on the scene.
In a split second, I hear someone say, "Hey, man, don't make a move." I say, "Hey, man, you got it." You know, I could feel a knife around my throat. I didn't have no gun or nothing but my billy club, my radio.
Officer Ricky Chavis is next.
I said, "Don't hurt me." And Clanton said, "We taking this building. We escaping."
As other officers run into death row, they're overpowered, stripped of their uniforms, bound, and gagged.
It got right rugged there. I was afraid.
One of the Brileys told us before they closed the door, if something happens and they don't leave, that he's gonna come back and start killing us.
The Death Row Six put on the guards' uniforms. One of them mans the control room. Using the prison radio and security codes obtained from a guard, he sends out a distress call.
Got a 1010 in death row. We request assistance.
Ready to make their break from the prison, they drag the captain to the control room, threatening to kill him unless he gets the main gate open.
Front gate, we've got a bomb scare. I need a van to come to the back gate. It's an emergency, please.
The front gate agrees to send a van. The escapees now have a way out if they can reach it without being recognized. They dress in riot gear with helmets concealing their faces. To create a phony bomb, they place a TV set on a stretcher and cover it with a blanket.
Can you imagine a bomb being as big as a TV and people on death row making a bomb that big? I mean, it was hilarious.
4 carry the fake bomb on the stretcher. The other 2 carry fire extinguishers. Realistic from a distance, they know their ruse isn't as convincing at close quarters. So as they make their way toward the van, they're relying on prison guards maintaining their distance. But yards from the van, a guard stumbles across them.
Stop! Stop! It's a bomb!
Falling for the ploy, the guard runs for cover. In seconds, the escapees are in the van, passing unchallenged through the prison gates and speeding off into the Virginia night.
It was just sinking in that we had actually got out. We was on a high like you wouldn't believe, and it was all natural. I mean, we was excited and screaming and hollering and just having a good time.
In the largest death row breakout in U.S. history, 6 dangerous murderers are now on the run. Peterson and Clanton lay low in the small town of Warrenton over the North Carolina state line, 30 miles from the prison. The remaining 4 steal a pickup truck and head north to Philadelphia. Back in Warrenton, Peterson and Clanton, still in prison guard uniforms, buy some cheap liquor at a gas station and hang out in the laundromat next door getting plastered. Minutes later, the escapees are recognized by a passing patrol car. The party's over.
They were arrested on the inside the building, just sitting there.
Peterson and Clanton are back in custody. Meanwhile, Lem Tuggle and Willie Jones are heading for Canada.
You assume they're going to go to the big cities or go somewhere where they can blend in. You know, so never in my wildest dreams did I imagine that, you know, these folks were going to come to Vermont.
In Vermont, just 7 miles from the Canadian border, the street-smart felon's luck runs out. Lost, running out of fuel, and cash, Tuggle heads alone to rob a local souvenir shop.
When she opened the cash register, I pulled the hunting knife. She just backed away from the cash register. She never said nothing. I never said nothing. So I think we was both just scared to death.
The shop clerk immediately calls police.
You figure nothing will ever happen because nothing does. And then, boom, there you are.
Before I could get away, a cop pulled in behind me. And when he did, I knew it was all over there.
We then ordered Tuggle out of the truck and down on the ground and, proceeded to take him into custody. At that time, he had a wad of money in his pocket, which, we believed he got from the robbery. He also had a very large butcher knife, probably, 10 to 12 inches long, stuck in his belt.
The next morning, realizing his cohort isn't coming back, Jones calls his mother. She convinces him to call it quits. 11 days after escaping, Jones turns himself into police. But the most dangerous duo is still at large, James and Linwood Briley.
We were really afraid that they were going to go on another killing spree because, after all, what do they have to lose?
The Briley brothers are lying low in Philadelphia. They've taken jobs at a local mechanic shop owned by a friend of their uncle.
They would help me with a little bit of work that would come in, but other than that, just mess around with girls and holler at them and sit out front. This is a Latino neighborhood. Puerto Rican girls in the summertime look pretty good.
But the good times are about to end. Back on death row, the recently captured Lem Tuggle is lapping up his newfound notoriety.
I mean, he had a big smile on his face. He acted like he was a big celebrity.
With fame going to his head, Tuggle rats on the Briley brothers. The FBI heads straight to Philadelphia.
The game was on, as we say in the business.
Staking out the Briley's uncle, a heavily armed SWAT team pulls up to the garage.
I was the first one out. When I jumped out, James Briley stepped out of the garage. I pointed my pistol at him, prone him out on the ground, handcuffed him.
Linwood is also taken in. The Brileys have been recaptured. Earl Clanton, Derek Peterson, Lem Tuggle, Willie Jones, James Briley, and his brother Linwood were all put to death in the electric chair.
They were bad men, evil men, yes. And they got what they deserved, in my opinion.
Strapped to the chair, Linwood Briley simply smiled and said, "I had my 19 days. I couldn't take that away." Coming up next, an inmate turns a trip to the hospital into the perfect escape. Her Majesty's Prison, Pentridge, in Melbourne, Australia. Inside, 1,500 hardened criminals.
Pentridge is a horror place. It has a history of men who've been there for decades, who've been hanged, who have been left in their cells to rot. A place of torture, of beatings, of solitary confinement, of suicides.
Inside its walls, 23-year-old Christopher Dean Bentz, awaiting trial for armed robbery. A career criminal and a serial escapee, his nickname, Badness, was well and truly deserved.
Some people try and work out a way to beat the system, to, play the horses or cards or whatever, I try and work my way to beat the system and escape.
On August 28, 1992, Ben's latest escape starts with a twist of fate.
Next thing I know, two quick jabs. I thought I'd been punched, I nearly died of loss of blood, and the base of my spine was severed, and so was my bowel.
Suffering multiple stab wounds, Benz is rushed to St. Vincent's Hospital in critical condition. He's placed in a high-security ward. Armed guards are posted, keeping watch 24/7. Fighting for his life, it would seem there is little chance for escape. But authorities had yet to learn, never underestimate Benz. 10 10 days later, sometime between 8 and 9 p.m. on Tuesday, September 8th, Benz has a visitor.
The story is that the female visitor smuggled in a firearm, handgun, believed to be hidden in the boot on an ankle.
When the guard near his bed turns his back for a second, Benz makes his move. He pointed the handgun at the back of the guard's head.
It's a traumatic situation to have a gun pointed at your head, having threats made, not knowing what might happen in the next few seconds.
A few things were said. He was very, he's going to be, how can I say it, cooperative in my attempts to flee.
Benz forces the guard to open the first deadlocked door. In the control room, he threatens the second guard.
Thinking, my God, he's got to kill him. So he done the right thing, he opened the doors.
Then Benz enters an elevator, taking it to the ground floor, where he runs through the emergency department carrying the gun. Wearing only a hospital gown, Benz runs out of the building, vanishing into the night.
Discovery.
In Melbourne, Australia, 23-year-old Christopher Dean Benz is on the run.
A prisoner awaiting trial in Melbourne has escaped from St Vincent's Hospital's high security ward. Police say guards were forced to open a secure door on the hospital's upper level when the man produced a revolver. Police have described him as dangerous.
Police helicopter, car, and foot patrols are dispatched immediately, but they were looking in the wrong state.
I was in Sydney by the next day. Too much heat for me in Victoria. I was splashed all over the news, so went there where it wasn't so tropical.
7 days after Ben's escape, police still had no idea where he was. But Ben's had a problem.
I need quick money, and so I just decided to rob a bank.
This gave the police the breakthrough they needed. An informant tipped them off that the bank robber was Benz.
Armed hold-up squad police began watching his home in Pittwater Road, Boronia Park, near Gladesville last night. Detectives swooped, acting on information that one of the men was an escapee from Melbourne.
It was prison again for Benz, this time in a different state. Parramatta Correctional Centre in Sydney, the oldest jail in Australia.
Within a week I've arrived there. I'd already worked out a way to escape, you know.
This time, all Benz needs is a hacksaw blade.
It was thrown over to us from the wall, over the wall. You know, we managed to thrown over a certain location at the jail.
It takes him 2 weeks to saw through the bars of his cell window. At 2:15 p.m. on October 25, 1992, he lowers himself out the window with a bedsheet rope and onto the roof.
But before I actually got airborne, I had to scale the razor ribbon around the thing. If my foot had got caught in that, I would have died.
Benz jumps an astonishing 5 yards onto another roof.
I made it. Just my imprints are on the roof to this day, on the tin roof to this day.
An officer in the watchtower spots Benz and fires, but the bullet misses. Ben's sheet rope breaks and he crashes 20 feet to the ground, breaking his wrist in the fall.
I couldn't feel it at the time because I'd already been shot at, you know, and my adrenaline's pumping, and I was in like no man's land in the sterile zone. One tower here, all they would have to do is spit at me, you know, like really, I'm only 10 feet from them on their walkway, the catwalk, you know.
In a hail of bullets, Benz climbs the perimeter fence and vanishes for the second time in 6 weeks.
He would be one of the most dangerous criminals to ever have been on the run.
For 6 weeks, Benz hid out with a criminal associate in rural Victoria.
It's uncomfortable because you don't know if someone recognises you. You have to be always very private, concealed, you know.
Then on December 5th at 8:50 p.m., police pulled over a van driven by Benz's friend, Edward Jockey Smith. Smith tried to shoot his way out.
He lived by the gun and last night died by the gun in the car park of the Farmers Arms Hotel near Ballarat. Smith was stopped by a lone police officer checking a stolen car. Drinkers ducked for cover as Smith produced a revolver and fired shots into the air.
2 hours later, police raided Smith's hideout where they made an extraordinary discovery. Christopher Dean Benz.
Oh, I was ecstatic. I thought this was one of our finest moments.
Badness was to spend the next 13 years in prison.
The leopard never changes its spots.
I'm a leopard whose spots have faded, begun to fade.
A recidivist criminal. He's a career criminal.
Christopher Benz, there's always a cell waiting for you.
In April 2008, Christopher Dean Benz walked out a free man, only to return to prison 6 short months later.